Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
How you guys doing tonight? Good. So you guys kind of got a background of who I am and where I come from. So yes, as she stated, I am a product of Minneapolis Public Schools. I graduated from Roosevelt High School. I'm not going to say the year, but it was a little while ago. So that's that. And also I worked in many capacities in Minneapolis Public Schools. But taking on this role as a Director of Office of Black Male Student Achievement has been probably one of the best jobs I've ever had. And so I'm very excited about the role. And so I got a few notes here because I know 15 minutes is not really that much of time. So I'm going to try my best to stay succinct and get to some points. So the question is, why have an Office of Black Male Student Achievement? And I say that kind of tongue-in-cheek, but we know that when we look across our nation, this is not just a Minneapolis issue, this is an issue across the nation, is that our black males are not necessarily doing very well when we look at academic outcomes for them. And we talk about academic outcomes, we're talking about graduation rates, test scores, behavior is one of the issues that stands out. And so our office is designed to change that. When I speak, and I haven't done it yet, so I'm going to do it right now, is that I usually like to share our mission statement for our office. So our mission statement reads as, we exist to awaken the greatness within black males and MPS to have them determined to believe and achieve success as defined by their own values and dreams. That's really important for us. I want to make sure that whenever we are in spaces, we share that mission statement. The reason why that mission statement is important is because it wasn't designed only by me or my staff. We had students at the table when we designed this mission statement. The work that we do in the office, is it okay if I come from behind this podium? Okay. The work that we do in the office is very student-centered. And so it's important that their voice is at the table and at the forefront of everything that we do, and I want to make sure that that's there and visible. So when we talk about starting this office, right, maybe you guys aren't aware of this, but this is the second office in the country that's specific to black males. The first office was out in Oakland, California. And so they are probably about 3 or 4 years ahead of us. So they started probably in 2010 or 2009, and we started in 2014 to start the office. So there was somebody who was working on this before they started to do this in Minneapolis. So I just want to give Minneapolis very huge credit for being courageous enough to say that we're going to focus on this specific population of students. Not too many people are willing to do that. Obviously, as you look across the country, like I said, there's only 2 offices that were created at the time, but we're starting to see more offices spring up. And so that's definitely a benefit. So when you get in this role, it's kind of like, what am I going to do? I remember my second day on the job, my boss came into my office and said, all right, Walker, so you're going to have to put together a presentation for the Board of Education and tell them what you're going to do for black males across this city. Okay. You see the laugh, right? But I don't know if I actually laughed. Maybe I had a different facial expression, but it was like, oh my goodness. I thought to myself, well, first of all, if I knew the answer to that, I probably wouldn't be sitting right here in front of you. Maybe out in Washington, D.C., working for the president, earning a little bit more money than what I was earning at that time. The second thing I was thinking, like, do they always expect me to have the answers? So that kind of scared me, right? That kind of worried me a little bit. So when he told me that, I said, okay, what are you going to do, Walker? How are you going to make this happen? And so I leaned on my training, my experience. I was a counselor, worked in nonprofits at the YMCA. And so I said, well, first off, you need to do a needs assessment. And that is, let's find out what's really going on in our city. Let's find out what our students need or what our families need, what our community members need, and what does our educators need as we're talking about this work with black males. And so my first 100 days, as I told the Board of Education, is all I'm going to do is listen. So my first 100 days, I outlined those 4 key stakeholders: parents, community members, educators, and then the young black men themselves to go out and listen. So I created these 5 questions that I was going around and asking different people. Please don't ask me what those 5 questions are right now, because I do not remember. But I have them saved somewhere. But it was basically finding out about what was their experience going through Minneapolis public schools, what are some things that they have seen success in so far, what do they expect now that there's an Office of Black Male Student Achievement, so it's questions like that. So that was probably 3 of them. I was pretty close to remembering. So when I went out and did these listening sessions, right, well, let me back up. The second part of that, so after I told the Board of Education that, The next day, I got a call from my boss, and we said, okay, we're gonna roll you out this way, Walker. We're gonna have this big town hall meeting. We're gonna do it at a school. We're gonna invite the media, invite families in. They can ask you questions, and you're gonna answer them. And again, I had that face. And not being familiar working down at the district offices, right? I was coming from a building, so I was definitely around students all the time and around families. So I hadn't had the luxury of being in a space with a lot of adults at one time. And so I'm sitting at this table with probably about 6, 7 adults, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, they're wrong again, but how do I tell them that without making them feel like I'm disrespecting them? So I got myself up, went out, grabbed a drink of water, came back in and said, okay, you guys, that's not what we're gonna do. I got a different plan. And they said, well, what's your plan, Walker? I said, well, first of all, we're going to go out and connect with people that haven't been able to connect with us before. I said, if we do that town hall meeting, we're going to get the people that's used to plugging into the system, voices heard. I said, if we want to make real change, we got to go out and hear different people's voices, different perspectives. And we got to connect with the folks who are not connected to our system right now. And so I said, well, I'm going to go out to barbershops and hair salons in the community. And some people chuckled and laughed in that meeting. It's like, what? I said, well, maybe they don't understand what happens in barbershops and hair salons in the black community. If you go into these spaces, you're going to hear the uncut raw truth of whatever conversation you're talking about. Sometimes it comes out nice and sweet, or sometimes not so much. But what we get to do is hear the real truth, and that's what we needed. If we want to really make change, I needed to hear the real truth of what their experiences was going through our system. And so that's the road that I took. So I went into the barbershops, hair salons. I walked down streets in North Minneapolis, South Minneapolis, stopping people and just asking them those questions that I had. Again, I wanted to make it important that they can share their true perspective. It's very intimidating to be in a big room and auditorium and share some frustration that you may have with a system that you didn't feel valued in the first place. So how am I going to criticize that system when I didn't feel like my voice mattered when I was going through that system? So I want to give them opportunities to be able to share their real, true feelings and true thoughts. So after my 100 days, what did I come up with? Well, I found out there was a system of broken beliefs, right? So when I talked to our families and parents, they didn't believe that the educational system was fair and equitable when it came to dealing with their black males. And when we look back at our data, again, talking about graduation rates, disproportionality of suspensions, they got a real valid point there. When I would talk to community members, they didn't feel that the educational system was serving all students. And again, when we look at our data, it kind of proves that, right? When I talked to the educators, they didn't believe they had the tools necessary to be successful with black males in the classroom. And they also, and they didn't say this directly, but they also didn't necessarily believe that black males could be successful. Some of the statements that they would use is, well, they're coming from single parent homes, socioeconomic status, the neighborhoods that they're growing up in. And so I was like, okay, I can hear what they're saying. And then when I talked to the young men, they didn't feel like their voices were heard. They didn't feel like they were valued. They didn't feel like they were connected to the schools. They didn't feel like they were getting to learn about who they were and where they come from. And so that was the things that I heard on this 100 days. And so then I came up with a belief framework that we use in our office right now that supports the work that we're doing. And the one component to this belief framework is that we have to have a growth mindset. Everybody is starting at a certain space and place in this work. Obviously, when you look at me on this continuum, I'm far to the right when we talk about black males, right? I am supportive, I am an unapologetic advocate for black males, but there's some folks who may be on the left side, and our role is to bring them along that path through the work that we're doing. So after we did that 100 days and I found out there was a system of broken beliefs, I came up with 3 areas that we're going to focus on in our office. And those 3 areas are professional development for educators, authentically engaging with our families and communities, and then direct service with our kings. And those 3 areas have been really successful so far. One thing, the reason why I wanted to have professional development as part of it is that, well, let me back up. First, I was not interested in professional development at all, right? That's not what my strong suit was. I was definitely a person who enjoyed working with students and not so much working with adults. I'm just gonna be honest, right? That's why I was in education. That's why I was in youth development, because I enjoyed working with students. But I understood that there was a component that we needed to have in this work is professional development. And that PD is about saying to folks that my job is not to fix black boys. Because when you have an office like this, sometimes people look at you and say, Walker, your job is to fix black boys. And what I tell them is that it's our job to change how we think and what we believe that black boys are capable of, right? We are the adults in this space, so how do we think? How do we approach them? Because my beliefs will dictate how I engage a student. So if I believe that they're not capable of learning, if I believe that they're going to be bad, then I'm going to kind of treat them in those manners. And so our goal is to try to change that. So we've created about 7 professional development workshops that we go out to schools and deliver with those staff members. When we talk about engagement with our families and communities authentically, right now we have a situation where a lot of our families don't trust the system, and they have good reason to not trust the system. And so we have to rebuild. We have to rebuild that trust. I'm trying to rebuild the trust with this system right now. I don't know if I'm rebuilding it or not. So we have to rebuild that trust. And what that means to me is we have to allow ourselves to be in their spaces. We're always asking families to come into our buildings, come into the school spaces. What we have to remember is that this information, this data that we currently have is not new data. Sometimes we want to think like, oh, we just found this out last week or last year or 2 years ago. This information has been around since integration, right? Our black families, our black students have been suffering through this experience since we have integrated schools. And so why don't we think that our parents had that same experience that the students are talking about at this time? And so we have to change that and readjust to how we engage with those families. And so what we do is we partner with community-based organizations who already have the trust of the parents and families, and then we go and participate in those events so that we can rebuild that trust so then they can trust what we're doing here in the school system. Does that make sense? Okay, perfect. And then the last component, talk about direct service with our kings. And that's something that we designed. We designed a class, and the class is called Black. I'm very intentional about using the word black because in every other part of life, well, I take that back. In finance, black is a good thing, right? If you're in the black division, you're doing well. So I will take that back. But in most spaces, black is always used as negative, right? And so I want to use this black acronym for something positive. So black stands for building lives, acquiring cultural knowledge. And so that's a class that we created through our office, and we partnered with the University of Minnesota. So Dr. Keith Mays, who is, well, I don't know if he still is the chair, but he was the chair of the African Studies Department over at the U of M. He is a partner with us and helps us design the curriculum that we have for our students in the classroom. And so we have launched this class. This is the second year of the class. Last year we were in 4 high schools and 4 middle schools. This year we're in the same amount of high schools and middle schools, but instead of having 1 class in those spaces, we have 2 classes in those spaces. So we have doubled the population of students that we're working with. And this class is basically an opportunity for students to learn about the experience of going through the United States as a black man. And so we deal with a lot of those issues and a lot of those things to support them. One thing that we really focus on is racial identity. We want to make sure they have a strong sense of who they are. And the reason why I say that is that as I've been doing this work, I have a critical question that I ask the educational system, and maybe you guys can help me with this later on, but that critical question that I have is, why have we been trying to solve non-academic issues with academic solutions? I'll say that again. Why have we been trying to solve non-academic issues with academic solutions? And what I mean by that question, or what I'm saying with that question is, sometimes we see a student that's struggling, and so we give them 3 or 4 math classes. Well, if I don't really care about math, I'm probably gonna fail all 3 or 4 of those math classes, right? So how do we put in place some opportunity for these students to get some self-worth, some self-identity with who they are, so they can understand why math is important? Right now we have missed that part of the work that we're doing. We talk about professional development for educators, and what we know in the past is that we've given teachers very, very tough training on content knowledge. We've given them very good training on how to structure your lesson and strategies to engage students, right? But what we haven't given teachers and educators is how to build those authentic relationships. One thing that we definitely focus on in our office is that we believe, our philosophy is that we believe that absent a relationship, it's hard to teach a student anything. But present in a relationship, you can teach them who gobs of stuff. And so we are very focused on building those relationships in our classrooms to help them participate in other classrooms. How much time do I have? Because I know I've been going. Probably like 2 seconds, right?
Half an hour.
Oh, I got a half hour left? Oh, okay.
2 to 5 minutes.
2 to 5 minutes, okay. I'll try to wrap it up. So we talk about these 21st century skills that we want students to leave our school system with, right? There's 4 of them. So there's critical thinking, there's collaboration, creativity, and communication. We add a 5th one to our work that we do, and it's called critical questioning, right? I want our students to be critical questioners of every single thing. The reason being is there's a couple. First of all, there's many narratives that has been shared about black males that are false. But they are put on TV, they are put in newspapers, they are put in magazines, they're put in songs, and sometimes people take that for the gospel, right? And so I want our young men to critically question that and say, where did you get that evidence from? Why are you saying that that's our narrative? The second component of why I want them to be critical questioners is that you become a more engaged learner that way. I'm looking at information, I'm taking it in, and I'm seeing how it impacts me, and now I'm going to ask questions about that. So now I'm able to synthesize that information, see how it impacts me, and then learn more from that. So that's kind of how we operate. Did I kind of get to 6:30 is right there. I mean, so I can keep going, but maybe there's questions that you guys may have for me, or...
I think what we like to do is have questions so that we can direct what people want to learn about what you want to do, your knowledge.
Okay.
Are you ready for questions? If people have questions? Okay. Who's first? Grace.
How will you measure your success or how the progress of your efforts are?
Yeah, perfect. So how do we measure? So we're looking at GPA data. We're looking at behavior incidents. We're looking at students taking more advanced coursework. We're looking at attendance and those sorts of things. And I'm gonna try to remember this off the top of my head, so forgive me if I get it wrong. But so I may not have the exact numbers. When we started out, before the office was ever created, the average GPA for black males was a 1.79 across the board. That was the average GPA for black males. Since we have been in existence, so at the end of first quarter this year, the average GPA for all black males across the district is a 1.83, I want to say, right? So it did go up a little bit. Now, the average GPA for black males who are in schools that we have developed and delivered our PD to, their GPA is a 1.99, I want to say, right? Now, the black males that are in our classroom, their average GPA is a 2.27. So it shows that the work that we're doing is having some impact on the academic success indicators that we're talking about. Obviously, this is after 1 year, so I'm not going to say that that's going to be the trend that way, but I want you to know that we are moving in the right direction, and we have to understand that we didn't get in this situation overnight, so we're not going to fix it or change it overnight. It's going to be time. Do you want me to manage the
Sure, that'd be fine.
question? Yes.
So, with absolutely no disrespect to Grace's question, I would also like to know how you respond to people who are privileging quantifiable results over the notion that wherever these human beings end up in the rest of their life, this is something that they deserve as kids.
So that's the hard work every single day, right? That's about building those relationships, having those difficult conversations. I think I said it here that our office, we are unapologetic advocates for black males, and so that we are the people that are standing in the gaps, in the spaces for our black males when they encounter difficulties throughout the school day and school year. So we are supporting families. We are having those difficult conversations with administrators and teachers and those sorts of things. Trying to really answer your question. There's really not a really concise answer for your question. So it's a real big question that you asked. But one thing that we try to focus on is about bringing voice to our students. And so I think I shared that with you guys, that they're at the center and at the table at every decision that we make in our office. And so they're part of that process. And how do we give them voice to speak to administrators, to speak about the work that they're doing? So when you're talking about quantifiable things, we're also doing student surveys, we're doing focus groups to get other understanding of ways that we can support and show that the work is happening. Obviously, our system is filled with you need to do something instantaneous. We're in a microwavable society right now where they want it instant. And when we're dealing with people, it takes time for that to grow and show. And so that's why we do some of those focus groups. That's why we do those surveys so we can see where they started from and where they're going to. One key component that I focused on, and you guys probably hear me talk about it. So I don't really believe in the achievement gap. I don't believe in that. I believe there's a belief gap, and I kind of shared that. What do we believe that our students are capable of? But one thing that the young men told me when I was going out listening to them, they said, I don't want to be compared to white students. Why is everything that I do compared to white students? Right? And so if you heard me talk about the data, I just talked about black males. I didn't compare them to any other group, because that's what we should be comparing them to. Compare them to themselves, let them figure it out. Don't compare them to this group, because once we do that, we're saying one group is dominant, right? And so how do we get away from that mind frame? And so they were very keen on understanding that. Yes?
When you say black males, I assume you're really talking about American black males. And I wonder how the Somali population and other African immigrant, recent immigrant population fit in, if there's conflict between the way they're treated by you or anyone, and
So,
how that works.
very good question. So when we're talking about black males, we are talking about stolen Africans, right? Let's be real. We're talking about stolen Africans, folks who ancestors went through slavery, not the Africans that came over here on their own free will. So that is the difference. Our office is definitely focused on that population. Now, to answer your question, do we have Somali students that are taking part in our class? Yes, we do have Somali students that are taking part of our class. But I will say that our class is focused on the black male experience. And to just be upfront and honest, some of our Somali students, our East African students, are now experiencing what it's like to be a black male, because they're starting to be put in that same category, even though their history may be a little bit different. But they are being put in that same category in some spaces. But I also want to just tease out that when we disaggregate the data, right, our immigrant students are doing better than our other black males that we're talking about. So they're doing better when we disaggregate the data as far as graduation rates, GPAs, taking advantage of advanced coursework. So that's why the focus is on the black males. And I think you had a question up here, and then I'll come.
I did have a question. As we try to figure out how we can have a better understanding of the situation that the black males are finding themselves in. So, you know, in our book clubs, a lot of us would read Ta-Nehisi Coates or The New Jim Crow. Are there other books that you would suggest that really help us understand here in Minnesota, what can we do to understand, and then go forward and help?
So I love books, but I would say you have to go there in person.
Yep.
Right? I mean, books is one thing, but how do you get yourselves out of your comfort zone and go into these spaces? We have to remember, we're asking our black males to come into all of these different spaces and feel uncomfortable, right? So how do we challenge ourselves to go in these spaces and learn from these black males, build authentic relationships, ask them those questions, be engaged with them. One thing I'll say is we're gonna make mistakes. We're all gonna make mistakes, but if we're not willing to make those mistakes, how are we gonna learn from them?
So
right?
can I push back a little bit?
You sure can.
So I agree. And I am volunteering in a school, and I think that's great, so I'd love to, maybe others would love to hear how can we do that in a really meaningful way. But I also think that until you have some of this context, it blew the women that I know that look like me, it blew me away.
For sure.
And I think both of those are helpful, so maybe you could speak to both of them.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a starting point. Reading a book is a starting point, is what I'm saying, right? So there's always these entry points. So reading a book is an entry point, but again, that's a book, right? You need to hear exactly what our young people are dealing with, what they're faced with. And I kind of missed some of the part of that question, so can you repeat that a little bit?
And so all I mentioned, I try to be quick.
Yeah, no problem.
But what are the places where, how can we make meaningful connections? What can we do specifically?
Gotcha. So specifics. Again, one thing I would say is sometimes we try to look at the big thing, and we get overwhelmed by that. What can you control in your sphere, right? What can you do in your small little way? So I'm not sure where you live, but is there a black male that's on your block? Is there a black male that is in your grandchildren's classroom? How do you build those type of small, authentic spaces? I talk to teachers all the time, and they keep saying, well, it's big, I gotta get my whole school. No, you don't. Take care of your classroom. What can you do in your classroom that makes it welcoming for black males in your space? What can you do in your classroom to make their voices heard? What can you do in your classroom to make them feel valued? If you start there, then we can have a snowball effect of many, many more people doing that, and then we'll get momentum going in that way. So it's really very small steps to doing that, and it starts with yourself. Yes.
I have two questions. One is you said California and Minnesota have this program.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other states that have this program? And the other question is, what changes do you see coming with the new administration in the near future, and what are you doing to deal with that?
Ooh, those are two. I mean, that first one was easy, but that second one was like heavy. Whoa. So, what other cities? So, right now, there's actually Dayton Public Schools has started an office, and I'm not sure the exact name, but I think theirs is Males of Color, so they're including black males as well as Latino students. They came here to Minneapolis, and we did some collaboration, so we helped them with their presentation. When they were going to present to the Board of Education, we met with them. We've had several phone conversations with them. The newest one that just popped up was one in Detroit. And so that just came out, I want to say like a week or two ago. So they're working on one office, and then also in Jefferson County, they have one that they're working on. So what, that's 4 or 5? Okay. So yeah, about 4 or 5 that are popping up. I don't know exact names of those programs, but they're working on focusing on black males. So now the second part of your question, I'm going to drop the microphone and go, no. No, I'm just joking. So what are we doing? So new administration, the new superintendent, Ed Graff, has been a very strong supporter of the work that we're doing in the Office of Black Male Student Achievement. So we've had a couple times to share the work that we're doing, and he's very supportive. He's actually mentioned us in a couple of his interviews about the results that we're getting and the positive praise that we have gotten throughout the district from schools that we are partnering with. So I think he's on board and willing to support the work that we're doing. Obviously, he wants to see results just like anybody else, which I cannot fault him for. What we're going to be challenging him on and the rest of our district is don't just look for the quantitative results. Don't just look for GPA or graduation rates. There's other things that we can be looking at to support our work, and that's where those focus groups, the change in confidence, the change in who I am, how am I accessing the learning. So we're looking at those as measures as well. Way in the back.
I volunteer in my grandson's first grade classroom. It's a very multidimensional classroom. It's a wonderful school, I think. But the kids on the bottom end, and they are not all African American. I mean, it's a very mixed group all the way from bottom to top, which is pretty exciting, I think. But the neediest kids in that classroom require so much, and I'm just kind of curious about how you're helping teachers develop the relationship, because I agree with you, that is it, right there. But when a teacher has 25 first graders, how does she develop a relationship with those kids that maybe need her the most? Anyway, I just wonder, how you instruct teachers.
So that's a very good question, and I would first off by say, so you asked me a question about an area that I'm not the strongest in. You said first grade.
Could you just repeat the question?
Oh, the question was what do we do to support teachers on how to build relationships in a classroom when they have a class of 25 students? Right, that's basically what she stated. So what we do is we provide strategies. So we have a training, and it's called our PD workshop. It's called Strategies to Engage Black Males. And so we give teachers tools and strategies to make the classroom just a little bit more welcoming in that space. Sometimes we think that it has to be these long, drawn-out conversations, but it could be very simple things. How are you welcoming students into your classroom? Are you waiting outside your door, greeting each one of them every single morning, and then having a little dialogue? How was your weekend? Right? Or how was your day yesterday? How are you starting that off with the students? The other piece is, how do you incorporate more movement into the classroom so that students are not sitting down for 6.5 hours? I mean, they are 6 years old. They need to move and be active, right? So how do we keep them moving but also learning at the same time that they're moving? And then there's opportunities. So, I know my daughter's teacher, which I think is a really, really good teacher. He shared a strategy with us that when he takes students on field trips and they go out of the building on buses or if they do walking field trips, he makes it intentionally a point to walk with different students each time. So how do we do those types of small things to build those connections and those relationships with students? Again, they're little people, they want to be liked, they want people to love them and want to have interest about them. So how are we valuing what they bring to the table? And sometimes it's small little things, but we get caught up thinking it has to be this huge thing. But there's small little things you can do to start that process. And then they'll start to come to you with different things, and you won't have to be the one initiating those conversations. So hopefully that answers it, but that's kind of how we put it.
It interests me, yeah, I mean, it's a difficult thing.
Yeah, for sure, especially with 25 6-year-olds. Yes. Someone had a question? And then I'll come to you.
I was curious about in your classroom activities currently, how Black males become involved. Do they self-choose? Are they recommended by counselors? Is it a combination process? And I would, as many have, do a second question to ask about how teachers are chosen or choose to participate in the PD that you are doing as
For sure.
you're growing your program.
So as far as the students, our office, so we're based out of the Davis Center, so we don't have any rights to any school, right? So we have to partner with school sites. And so very intentionally on my part, I didn't want to go in and select students to be in our program. I didn't want anybody to think that we were cherry picking and saying, well, you're going to get all the good students, Walker. Of course your program is going to be very well and supported. So what I said is, when we found out that they wanted to partner with us, I said, you decide which 20 students you want to be a part of our class. And so whatever 20 students you give us, that's what we're going to work with. So the school selected, some students self-selected, but it wasn't us who were looking out to recruit. So we let the schools do that. And you got to remind me your second question.
It was how the selection process went for teachers for PD as well.
So if your school signed on to have our class, the building principal had to make it a priority that our 5 PD workshops were mandatory. And mandatory is kind of not a word that we can really use, but it was highly suggested that you attend. Yeah, highly suggested that you attend these sessions. So with that being said, we've had great turnout at some of our PD workshops. There are some schools where we haven't had as good of a turnout, but again, we can't really make it mandatory. But I think we have schools and teachers who are interested in the PD workshops, so they are showing up and getting some information from this. Are there staff who may push back a little bit? Of course there are, and I welcome that. As you heard me say, I want our students to be critical questioners. I also want the staff to be critical questioners, because I'll stand up here and tell you, I don't have all the answers, right? A lot of this stuff is something that I'm working on, I'm learning as I go, and it's a part of a process. And so how do we show our vulnerabilities so that others can show their vulnerabilities, and we can all get this together? So we're not ever coming into buildings saying that we're the all-knowing. We have some information, and hopefully through our dialogue, our work together, we can glean all the good information from everybody and use that to support our babies in our schools. So that's kind of how we approach the work. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, you said you were in 4 high schools and 4 middle schools. Have there schools who have opted out of doing this, or what, was it just only possible to go to 4 schools?
League of Women Voters. This is where it comes in, right? I need y'all vote. Need you guys to vote, right? So we have our budget is $1.2 million for the district, and we have about 5,000 Black males across the district. So yeah, about 5,000 Black males. So roughly about 13% of our population is Black males in our district.
Is that not counting the Somali students?
That's not counting the Somali students. Yep, that's Black males for sure. So that question you asked, how did we come up with those schools? Well, that's what our capacity is right now at the moment for what we can serve and who we can serve. And again, I talked about relationships being important. Being an assistant principal in the district prior to taking on this role, I had relationships with building principals and other assistant principals. I had to make sure that going into these schools, we had a leader who was ready for this type of work. because we are intentionally doing things different than what has been done in the past in regards to our black males. So our classroom looks a little different. Our design is gonna be different. So we're gonna push the school. And if you don't have a leader that's standing in front who's willing to go to bat with you for that, it could be a difficult transition. And so we are working with schools that I had previous relationships with administrators in those buildings, and as well as they had high populations of black males, so it kind of worked out. But that's how those schools were selected to work with. Yes.
How much of the school day are these boys in this class?
So it's a one class, so it's 1 hour a day. So it's so the class is a credit-bearing class. So I was very intentional about that. When we talk about, let me see, how do I explain this? So I'm a licensed counselor. You guys heard that. So I think that groups are really important, right? The social emotional learning is really important. But sometimes in our educational system, we don't necessarily value groups. Right? We say, well, you're taking out of instruction time, and so you're taking away from the actual learning that's going on in the classroom. But in these groups, there's a lot of learning going on as well. And so I played on the knowledge of me having knowledge of the education and said, so we're going to create a class. So even though it's a class, it's more looking like a group. It's more formatted like a group. So we have 3 days. So our class is designed this. So we have 3 days of curriculum. And so that's the curriculum that we partner with the University of Minnesota to deliver for our students. Then the other 2 days are designed a little differently. So one day we kind of borrowed from the AVID program. You guys familiar with AVID? It means advancement via individual determination. They have a component in their program where they bring in tutors into their classroom to support students. So one day a week we bring in tutors to come in and support our students around their other classes, math, science, social studies, ELA. And then the 5th day, or however it balances out, we have a thing called open mic. And basically what that is group counseling, right? So we have some group counseling in the process where students are able to discuss anything that they are struggling with or that they need support around. And we use the counseling process to support each other. So it's not like just because if I'm leading the class, it's not just me delivering information, it's the entire class supporting each other and giving the knowledge that they have that can help that student out as they navigate the school system. What we found out is that this open mic day has really been connected to our curriculum. So it kind of just breeds and feeds on the curriculum. So it's not even off topic. It's right on topic, and it keeps us moving good and through the curriculum. The one thing I really enjoy about our class is that we're not bound by any state standards, right? So that at any given moment, we can stop the curriculum and go with what's going on in the community right now. So just like last year when the Jamar Clark situation happened, we were able to stop. I called all the teachers and said, hey, tomorrow, next couple of days, don't even think about curriculum. We need to figure out how these young men are doing with this situation that happened in our community, because we have a lot of students who live in that community who may have connections to Jamar Clark, so we want to make sure that they are okay. We do some different training for our staff in the Office of Black Male Student Achievement. Every one of our staff is trained in psychological first aid and trauma in the black body, so we are very informative about that and want to make sure that our students feel comfortable as they're coming into our spaces, because we have to understand that depending on our nervous system, it can impact the nervous system of our babies. And so if we're escalated, we just escalate our babies. So how do we keep ourselves de-escalated to support our young people as they're coming into our classrooms and our buildings? Yes.
Your job seems like it can be 24/7, 365, am I correct?
Ask my wife.
I was just wondering how you're involving the families. I mean, a mother, no matter what color, no matter what height, no matter what weight, a mother is a mother. And there's a lot of respect, I think, in that community for mothers and grandmothers.
For
and
sure.
How are you taking advantage, basically, of the population sitting here? Because it kind of has to trickle down to develop a relationship with a young 17-year-old teen, no matter what color, is a little difficult, even in your own family. So how are you integrating the families? Because, and I'm worried that your job is just way too big.
Thank you for worrying about that. So you said, how do we integrate families? So one component of our class is that our teachers are, well, I tell them in certain terms, you're going to make 5 phone calls home a week, and they're all going to be positive, right? So how are you connecting with families and sharing those positive messages about their babies? What we found out when we were doing that is that there was a lot of families who had never received a positive phone call about their black male. Most of the times they get calls from our school districts, it's been negative. So that's one way that we have rebuilt and regained that trust from that. The other piece is what we're doing is we're doing something called life coaching. And so what that life coaching is an opportunity for our families to take on, what are your goals? What are your dreams? We're not talking about anything related to the educational system. We're going to take care and support families as much as we need. And what we are planning and what we are anticipating is that if we're supporting families, which is the mother, father, grandparent, whoever is the caregiver for that child, to come in and take advantage of these life coaching sessions, as they start to figure out their goals, start to figure out what they want to do, that trickles down to their kids, because now they have a plan for what they are attempting to accomplish. And so how do we do that is that we have these life coaching sessions that they can participate in throughout the school year in different spaces. Again, we partner with other community-based organizations to deliver that. Yes, ma'am.
What about black girls?
I know.
So we go from the job is huge to let's add another component to the job, right? And I hear you loud and clear. And the funny part about that is the young ladies have told me loud and clear, what you gonna do, Walker? What about us, right? So what I will say is that this past summer, in the summer, so I've had 2 summers working in the position. I've hired interns to work in our office with us in the summer to help us develop different things. This past summer, I hired 2 females to help me start to think about what we could do for black females in our district. Obviously, looking at me, I'm not an expert on black females, and I will never claim to be. So we will partner with different people who can bring that expertise to the table. So right now we have a pilot program going on over at Edison right now, where we have a group of young ladies that is working with one of our partners to see how that is working. So they meet once a week and they're working on that. And we also have another pilot program at a middle school site as well, working with the young ladies. So we are starting that work. The issue becomes, again, League of Women Voters, money. Right? I didn't get any additional funds to support black females, so I'm taking money that was dedicated and directed for black males to try to support some of our black females in certain ways. So I do understand that that is really important and really valuable, but we're going to need more money to do that, as more people power. But I just want to make sure that we understand that the work that we're doing with black males will impact black females. Right? As they start to look at themselves differently, they'll start to treat our black females a little bit differently, and now that will just permeate throughout our community. So even though it's not directly working with black females, indirectly we are having an impact with our black females. So, yeah. Yes, sir.
Quick thought experiment. If you could get whatever budget you need, would you still stop at middle school, or do you see that
permeating down?
Yeah.
Great question. So we are doing something at the elementary school level. So this year is our first year that we're going to be working with elementary sites. So I really focused on the middle and high school in this conversation. But last year, what we did is the schools that we didn't have the class in, so elementary schools, we also selected 4 elementary schools that we just did the professional development with. So we did do that. We didn't have a pull out with the students, but we had PD workshops with 4 of those elementary sites. So they went through the same process with us. This school year, again, working with Dr. Mays from the University of Minnesota, he's developed a curriculum with the help of some students, help with some families and parents, to work with elementary age students. And so today and yesterday, today is what, Monday? Monday. So today and yesterday, I had meetings with 2 of our elementary school partners to start our program with our elementary school students. And so when we come back from winter break, we're going to start that work with the elementary students. And it's going to be a pull-out format. And just to give you kind of like a little teaser of what the curriculum is going to be, we're looking at superheroes, using superheroes to talk about identity development. And we're going to be using black superheroes that are not necessarily mainstream to work with that, so they can start to understand what are some of their attributes, what are some of their skill sets. And then also, as superheroes, we always have weaknesses. So how do you stay away from your weaknesses and then get your weaknesses stronger? So that's kind of the little teaser of what we're going to be working with our elementary students.
And just follow up, and eventually working with the parent group at that level.
Exactly.
I mean, professionals, the parent groups, the students.
Yep, so it'll be all coming together. And actually the parents have always been a part of the work, so we have never distinguish about if they're elementary parents coming to our like life coaching session, so they still get to come to that right now. It was just that my ability to work with babies, I wasn't so for sure about that. So I wanted to make sure I had some time to have some people around me help me figure out what can we do with younger students. So that's what the holdup was. It wasn't anything about the system. It was just me making sure that we did it right by my experiences with middle school and high school. So that's kind of where I started. That was my comfort zone, so to speak. Yeah.
Did I miss it, or did you, how much of a staff do you have for this wonderful monumental work?
So it's myself, and then we have a educational equity coordinator, a person who helps and develops our professional development for our educators. We have a person that works with our families and community members. We have 3 teachers who are teaching our classes in the schools. We have a office specialist, and then we have a person who works with our REAA department, Research, Evaluation, Assessment, and Accountability department to support us, so that's data. So what's that, 9 that I just number off? 9 staff? Yeah, 9 staff.
9 staff with 5,000 students.
You see that? Exactly, that's why I need some more money. Help us out, League of Women Voters. Yes.
I just wanted to ask, how will you assess your programming going forward and kind of judge where you need to change and evolve?
So, listening, right? Listening to the babies, listening to teachers, listening to families, listening to parents. So I continue that cycle. So we're always out getting that information, getting that feedback. So I do a consistent feedback loop. So every year we have an end of the year celebration where we're sharing our current data, and then we're asking questions about what can we do to get better, right? We have I don't like to call them an advisory board because then they won't show up ever, right? so I don't call them an advisory board, but I have a group of community members that we bring together twice a year to roll out different information and get feedback from them. But they are called an advisory board, but they are. They just don't know. Right? Because he was like, "Hey, you're on this advisory board." Like, "Oh, I don't got time to do that." Walter, like, "Hey, my time is valuable." Right? So I say, "Oh no, just come to this meeting real quick, and I'll have another one at the end of the year." So I have it twice a year, and they've been coming, so it's all good. So I use that constant feedback loop, and then looking at that, we obviously have a logic model that we are working from, and just again, I think what we have missed is the ability to be flexible and nimble in education, and so we're trying to stay in that vein and saying that if we see things that need to be changed, we're changing them on the spot. We're not waiting until the end of the school year to change it. We're making those changes instantly right there when we hear feedback from our students. One way I'll just share is that we were in a classroom actually 2 weeks ago. We were just doing a little kind of, I guess it was a focus group, but not really, just asking questions about how they were doing. And one student said to me, and Corey Yeager, who's our educational equity coordinator, he said, "Hey man, we tired of taking all these quizzes." I was like, "Well, why are you tired of taking the quizzes?" He said, that told me that my time is up. He said, "We're tired of taking all these quizzes." I said, "What do you mean by that?" He said, "Well, the quiz is telling me what you want me to learn." He said, "I'd rather do reflections because now I get to show you what I learned and what was important to me." And I was like, "Oh, right?" So the next meeting I had with our teacher, I said, "Guess what? We're not doing any more quizzes. Everything we're doing is reflection because the students have spoken. They said, you're dictating what I need to learn. Let me learn what I need to learn." And so we listen to those things and we try to incorporate those every single day as we're hearing from our babies because it makes them more engaged. They see that their voice matters. They see that their perspective matters. And so now they're part of the process all the time. And so I think it's a win-win for us because we get to be innovative and then they also get to see that when they speak, people are listening and actually doing what they are asking. So, yes.
How do you finance all this? Is this all Minneapolis tax money? Is it grants, donors, are you with the state, with the federal government?
So right now it's all school district money, so we're getting a lot from the general fund and then we also get some dollars from integration. We have been out looking for grants and private dollars, but we haven't been very successful yet. Obviously, they want to see more than 1 or 2 years of success when you're looking at private funders, and so we have to wait our turn until we got some more years of success to show them. What I would say, though, is once we do have those years of success, we have to get out of the 3-year funding cycle. Because what happens is that funding cycle makes people start to compete with each other. And so I'll help you for 3 years, and now you go away. Well, what am I supposed to do? right? So how do we make these funding cycles a little bit longer so we can support? We can't think or believe that things are going to change in 2 or 3 years. We're talking about people here, right? But I know there's always a new flavor of the month. Let's support this work, let's support that. And so that's where you start getting people being very territorial about the work they're doing, the students they're selecting to be in their programs, because everybody is worried about showing results. And they want high and positive results. So that's a struggle. Yeah.
Can you just briefly tell us exactly what your title is, exactly the name of the program? Because it mentioned in the beginning, it's already disappeared, but if we're going to start talking about it, we really need to know the name.
Okay, yeah, no problem. So my name is Michael Walker, M-I-C-H-A-E-L. I am the director for the Office of Black Male Student Achievement. So Michael Walker, director, and the department is Office of Black Male Student Achievement for Minneapolis Public Schools.
Office of Black Male
Student Achievement.
Okay.
Yep. Yes.
Have you considered using mentors from the community, pairing them up? Maybe you do it already, or see that happening in the future? Would it be of value?
So, I'm going to get on my soapbox for a second. We're talking about mentors. Again, listening to our young people, one thing that was loud and clear is that they're not interested in mentors who are coming to the schools for 1 hour a week for 6 or 7 weeks. They said, that doesn't do anything to me. That doesn't help me at all. Yeah, I get to talk to somebody for an hour, but I'm not really going to open up to that person. I need someone who's going to be there when times get rough, when it's 8 o'clock at night and I got a situation that I'm going through. Who can I call and talk to? And so when we talk about mentors, I'm very protective about that as we're saying who's going to get in front of our young men. One reason is that people come in and out of our lives so much, right? And when we think about that, we're asking our students to tell their story over and over and over again. That's traumatic. That is traumatic, especially at some of these ages that we're talking about, 13, 12, right? They're having to tell that story to a new person so many times. And so I want people who are going to be there and is going to be there for the long haul. And so that's hard to do in a traditional mentoring program. And so what we have created is our class is basically that. You know, we have this term that people like to use, role models, right? You guys all hear that term? And I'm gonna say something that you guys, I hate that term, right? And I'll give you a reason why I do not like that term. Because role models typically are people that our students can't touch, right? They're entertainers, they're actors, they're athletes, right? And so these people, we don't know who they really are. We are being given a character of who they are on TV, right? And so the term I use is real models. I want real models, students that students can see every single day, that they can ask these difficult questions to, that they can see walking in their communities, that they can see going to work every day, how it is to have a family, that they can see a real model. And so how do we get more of those people in our spaces? And the classroom teachers that we have teaching the Black curriculum are those real models. So again, it's more like a group counseling. So we do more group mentoring than individual mentoring. Now, have we partnered with other organizations that come in and work with some of our students? Yes, I'll say that. But we haven't put together a traditional mentoring program. It's more authentic. You come into our spaces, you're welcome into our classrooms. How do you engage with our young people? How do you get to know them through some of our curriculum and through some of our monthly events? And then you can build those mentoring things naturally. And it's not like, you're a Black male, 19, you like basketball, you like soccer, I just put y'all together. That's sometimes how it happens, right? That's not gonna work. Let's let that happen naturally, organically. Yes.
Can you tell us which high schools you're in?
Yeah, for sure. So we're at South, Edison, North, and Fair downtown. And then the middle schools that we're at is Franklin, Falwell, Field, and Northeast. And then we're going to be at these elementary sites. It's going to be Bethune, Pillsbury, Riverbend, Kinney, Bancroft. I think those are the 5. Yeah, I think those are the 5. Yes. Yes.
Have you found, and this is not a number score, but have these students that have been in your program, are they more engaged in their classrooms? Have the teachers thought that they're more interested and more engaged in their work?
It's a great question. let's see, how do I answer that? So there's a couple ways I can answer that. I can answer that with a negative answer, but I think it'll tell the story when I answer with a negative answer, right? So students who are participating in the Black program, who have our class, we have seen an increase in their behavior. Increase in their, right? That doesn't sound right, right? Like, how would there be an increase in their behavior, right? But I'm going to take us back to something I said a little bit earlier. What am I teaching? What are we teaching our young men to be in this class? What do we talk about? What did I say I want them to be?
Critical questioners.
Critical questioners, right? So when you are a critical questioner as a Black male, how is that perceived? Let's throw some terms. How is that perceived as a Black male? Aggressive, right? Troublemaker, right? Right? But if there's a white student that's like that, he's curious. He's interested in this, right? But when it comes to a Black male, he's disrespectful. And so what happens is, now you start to see teachers sending him out a little bit more, right? Because they feel like their authority is being questioned because they're questioning what's going on in the classroom. And so we have to ask our teachers, do you really want engagement or not? And that's why our PD is so very important in these schools, so we can share with our teachers that, hey, this is how you get prepared and ready for the students, because this is what they're going to come in and be. They're going to question you. They're going to question the curriculum. They're going to question the lessons, right? And that's what they should be doing. We want that inquisitive mind in education. We talk about it all the time. That's what we want. But sometimes only from certain people.
So if you could look 5 years out and say you had succeeded, what would that, I mean, right now you're touching 1% or, you know, whatever of the African-American boys. What would that look like? Would you get all 100 in these classes or do it 20?
Well, that's a big question. So if I looked out 5 years, you want to know like detail, just like what my vision would be. What would the landscape look like? So the landscape would look like we have 100% of our Black males graduating on time. The landscape would look like that we have students who are going on to post-secondary education opportunities. Not necessarily a four-year college, but going on to do something after high school that says they're licensed or they earn a degree or diploma to actually take care of themselves and their family if they choose to have one. What we'll see is that we'll see more teachers, Black males, teaching in our profession on a daily basis to show them that they are Black males in education. What we will see is that we will see graduation rates increase in advanced coursework, so students who are taking AP, IB who are Black males in our system. What we will see is students who are not disproportionately suspended or sent out of classroom in our educational system. So that's the vision that I would see for in 5 years. That's what I would like to see. And of course, included in that would mean that we would be directly impacting more students with our class. So maybe our class is something that's across the district. So it's not just out of the Office of Black Male Student Achievement anymore. It's out of our teaching and learning department, where this class is something that's credit bearing, but also towards graduation. The reason why I connected directly with the University of Minnesota is, being a counselor, I understand the value of taking post-secondary educational opportunities or taking these AP classes. If you are successful in one of these classes, you're more likely to graduate from high school. If you happen to earn 9 to 12 credits of PSEO before you graduate high school, you're more likely to graduate from college, right? So the reason why we're doing that is I want this class, this Black class that we have created, to become a college in the schools class. And so I was intentional about partnering with the University of Minnesota so we can get on that path to see how do we make that possible for our young people. Sometimes when we have PSEO options for our students, it's usually in the traditional classes. It's in science, math, right? And if I'm not doing so well in those spaces, maybe I don't think college is an opportunity for me. So how do we put them in different spaces where they can see themselves in college? Maybe there's a art class they can take as a PSEO option. Maybe there's a health class they can take as a PSEO option, so they can see themselves in those spaces, and then it'll spark some other interest to take those other classes of English, science, social studies, and math.
I think we have to stop. I think that's a perfect time to stop, to see your enthusiasm for how it's going to be. It's wonderful. I want to leave a little time for some discussion among the folks. But first of all, can we thank my...